Welcome to Holy Week. When I was preparing this series of talks, I was hoping that I would be able to deliver them face to face, but for now that's not to be. But my hope and prayer is that we will see each other again very soon indeed. This week we will journey to the cross. We'll reflect on many different aspects of Jesus, and we'll reflect a little bit on what happened yesterday, Palm Sunday. The moment and the times that we're going through can be very dark indeed. The coronavirus brings uncertainty to many of us and often brings fear as well. Fear of the unknown, fear of the future. Perhaps you may have financial fears or fears for your family as well. Fear can be a very debilitating thing indeed. And Jesus has a lot to say and speak into the fears that you and I may have in our lives, particularly during this time. In our gospel reading in Luke, we hear Jesus saying this: when you hear of wars and rumours of wars and revolutions, Jesus says these are times of darkness. But then he says, do not be frightened. Be not afraid. And this is a key theme that I want to return to again and again during this week, and particularly as we go through the dark times that we're going through right now. Jesus very clearly says to us, be not afraid. Do not worry. When life is hard, particularly right now, it can feel like the world that we've known has come to an end. But actually, this isn't the final answer. Not a bit of it. For this too will pass. And I'd love you to hold on to that thought that even what we're going through now will pass. For Jesus, for Christians, for people everywhere, there is for me a theory that trouble, and we're certainly going through trouble right now, trouble is always followed by triumph. Trouble comes before triumph. And certainly in our Palm Sunday readings yesterday and all that happened there, that seems to me to be a truth, that trouble comes before triumph. On Palm Sunday, Jesus, as he was riding into Jerusalem, was aware of the trouble that was to befall him on Good Friday. And the trouble facing him was beyond compare. It was a very troubling future that he had. Matthew 27 says this. This is what what Jesus was going to face on Good Friday. They would strip him. They twisted thorns and set it on his head. They spat on him. They struck him on the head again and again and again. And they led him away to crucify him. Jesus knew trouble. Jesus can empathize with everything that we're going through right now. Our uncertainties, our fears, our times of despair and darkness, our worries. Why can Jesus empathize? Because he's been there himself. Jesus has known great trouble. And as we look forward, in one sense, to Good Friday, as we think about Good Friday, we know that the disciples themselves faced their own times of despair and darkness. As they looked at Jesus crucified on that cross, all they could see was trouble. Trouble ahead of them, trouble right now, trouble because they were followers of the one who was crucified. And they couldn't see beyond the trouble. They couldn't see beyond the cross. The one who they'd hoped would be their saviour, the one who they hoped would bring light, was dead on a tree. And they couldn't see beyond that Good Friday. It was Friday and Jesus was dead on a tree. It was Friday and the sheep had lost their shepherd. It was Friday and Mary's world was torn in two. It was Friday and it tells us that darkness descended. It was Friday and they were full of grief. It was Friday and people wept. And I wonder how often do we look at life like this, particularly during this period we're going through. I know at times I do. It all seems darkness. There doesn't seem to be a future. But what those disciples at the foot of the cross didn't know was that it may have been Friday and it may have been all darkness in that moment. But what they didn't know was that Sunday was on its way. Sunday was coming, that glorious day when Jesus burst out of that tomb, that glorious moment where he conquered death, that amazing moment when light beat darkness. It may have been Friday, but Sunday was coming. It may have been Friday, but Sunday was on its way. It may have been those times of darkness and despair, but the light of Easter Sunday was just around the corner. And this is the good news that we've got to hold on to in our moments of despair, in our moments of darkness. At times it will feel like Good Friday, but we must hold on to the fact that Sunday is coming. Easter is on its way. And metaphorically, Easter is on its way. Easter is literally on its way in a week's time. But all the glory of Easter, the light of Easter, the hope of Easter will come to us. And when we're through this lockdown, and when we're through this pandemic, it will feel like a very real Easter day, with light flooding back in once more. So those words of Jesus in the gospel today, do not be frightened. We need to hold on to those. Those words, fear not, be not afraid. And why does Jesus say that? Because he is with us to see us through. And as we go on during this week, we'll reflect more on those words, be not afraid, and their meaning to us in our lives right now.